Greetings, I'm your host, Dr. Wolfula, and when I'm not feeding the homeless to mutated sharks, I'm here at the Wolfula reviewing movies. The subject of this particular review is a bit contentious. The Blair Witch Project. This year marks the 20th anniversary of this found footage film's release, and few horror movies before or since have inspired as much controversy. Blair Witch's controversy is a little different from the controversy most horror flicks garner. For instance, Cannibal Holocaust, the originator of found footage horror, is controversial for graphic violence, rape, animal cruelty, and maybe just a bit of racism. Blair Witch, on the other hand, isn't controversial for its content so much as it is for its lack of content. But I'll get into that plenty later. If you've been living under a fucking coffin rock, Blair Witch Project was pretty much to found footage what Halloween was to slashers. It was the first big hit that kicked off a trend. Blair Witch was an indie flick with a shoestring budget that went on to be the second most profitable film of all time, earning $250 million against a 60 grand budget, which is only surpassed by Paranormal Activity, another found footage flick. All in all, Blair Witch Project was a huge phenomenon at one point and really captured people's imaginations and spawned a multimedia franchise, but then, suddenly, all of that disappeared as quickly as it came. Now, mentioning Blair Witch Project will probably elicit a groan in conversation. The film has become popular to shit on in recent years, and it's increasingly faded out of relevance. So what happened exactly that reversed this film's fortunes? Well, hopefully by the end of this video, we'll all fucking know why. And if not, then I guess I failed. What else is new? To help me delve into the Blair Witch mythos and fully understand its history, I've sent my faithful undead servant Goulash out to the field of Burkittsville, Maryland, to shine some light on the legend and maybe catch the old gal on camera. Oh, there you are, Goulash. How did you like that first-class flight?
You didn't fly me here, sir. I had to hitchhike my way here in exchange for unspeakable favors.
Haha, cool. I see you're at the woods already.
Yeah, I tried interviewing people in Burkittsville about the Blair Witch, but they kinda just laughed at me. So I'm just gonna skip straight ahead to wandering around aimlessly in the woods to try to maintain what remains of my shattered dignity.
Alrighty, I'll catch up with you later, Goulash. Anyway, the Blair Witch Project was the brainchild of directors/writers Daniel Myrick and Eduardo Sanchez of Haxan Films. The concept of the flick came about from the duo's shared fear of paranormal documentaries, so they decided to make a horror film under the guise of a real paranormal doc. Now, horror films have claimed to be based on real events plenty of times, but it's usually a marketing gimmick that's conceived after the film is made, like with Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Blair Witch Project was not only specifically made to trick people from the start, but the flick uses supposedly real footage to accomplish this. Before the movie was even made, the filmmakers did a promo for a TV show where they pretended that they actually found the footage they would eventually shoot themselves, and that they were in the process of assembling it.
You know, the footage could be nothing, but yet the footage could be quite spectacular, and we still have to keep in mind that 3 people are gone.
These motherfuckers were tricking people before they even had anything to trick people with. Now, you can't really talk about Blair Witch Project without addressing what really made it a success at the end of the day. It wasn't just the marketing gimmick, but it certainly helped. The flick was bought for $1 million by the defunct Artisan Entertainment after all the buzz the filmmakers got distributing missing persons posters featuring the film's cast. What really made this movie a hit, though, was that it was the first ever viral marketing bonanza. This flick had a website, but it wasn't like Space Jam where you can see some behind-the-scenes pics of Michael Jordan and Bugs Bunny hanging out or whatever. No, this site's purpose was to sell the film's fake reality by breaking down the mythology of the Blair Witch and showing all kinds of very fake evidence to support the events of the film being real. People bought this shit. It was very convincing. You delve into all this material before anybody can tell you it's fake, and you're gonna want to see the actual film to draw your own conclusions. It was fucking genius marketing, and it was taken even further with all the cross-promotions. Not only was the Blair Witch Project the first ever successful viral marketing campaign, but it was also the first film to use transmedia storytelling. Now that's a fancy sounding term, Dr. Wolfula. What does it mean? Well, I'll clue you in. Essentially, transmedia storytelling is when you use multiple forms of media to tell a larger story. Blair Witch Project spawned a pretty massive franchise at the height of its success, and all that material heightened the realism of the film and enriched the mythology. A dossier dossier was published that compiled all kinds of fake newspaper clippings, journal entries, and articles. Comics were published that depicted the film's long backstory. A soundtrack was released that was supposedly a mixtape made by one of the deceased main characters. Ooh. There was even a fucking video game series. There are more Blair Witch video games than Friday the 13th video games. Let that fucking sink in. Out of all this shit, though, the most instrumental contribution were the tie-in mockumentaries released before and after the flick came out. If you're gonna watch this movie, Curse of the Blair Witch, which aired on Sci-Fi Channel, is pretty much required viewing. It gives a full, detailed breakdown of the Blair Witch mythos and explains shit that the movie doesn't actually bother with, like who the Blair Witch was and how the footage was even found. There's also Burkittsville 7, which is a pretty fascinating mockumentary in that it totally denies the Blair Witch's existence from the start as nonsense, and instead focuses on an aspect of the mythos in a true crime documentary fashion. I'll get into all the lore stuff in a bit, but these mockumentaries sold the mythos in a very clever, believable way with twists and turns like any real documentary would have. So yeah, you can see how the Blair Witch Project became such a huge success with all the marketing hype and the promotional material that made the film seem credible. A film with humble beginnings became a gigantic phenomenon overnight. All of this is fine and good and explains where all the millions of dollars came from, but what about the actual movie, The Blair Witch Project? Removed from all the peripheral media that built the film up in people's minds, does The Blair Witch Project hold up on its own merits as a movie, and not just the fucking social experiment it eventually became? Well, let's break the movie down and determine whether or not it really is deserving of all the backlash it's gotten, or if it's really a misunderstood classic. There's no room for anything in between when you're discussing films online. It's either the greatest thing ever or complete garbage. The premise, and pretty much the whole story of Blair Witch Project, is summed up quite succinctly with the minimalistic opening title sequence. In October of 1994, 3 student filmmakers disappeared in the woods near Burkittsville, Maryland while shooting a documentary. A year later, their footage was found. Those 2 sentences are straight to the point. The film is exactly that, and you got quite the hook. But to get a little more specific, the film deals with a young documentarian named Heather Donahue, which is also the name of the real actress. Yeah, part of the realism gimmick is that the 3 characters share the same names as their actors. Heather ventures to a small town to research the local legend of the Blair Witch along with her classmates Joshua Leonard, the cameraman who doesn't own a tripod.
So where's Mikey at?
We have to go get him.
Okay.
And Michael Williams, the sound engineer who can apparently record sound even when he's not recording sound.
Pour me a shot, please.
Oh!
I'm freaking out.
You can't do that.
Yes,
You're the director.
at this point, I fucking have to do that, all right? I fucking have to.
Something that is immediately apparent about this film that gives some credence to it being shitty is, well, it looks like garbage. The film has a 4:3 aspect ratio and was shot with 2 cameras. One is really low quality color video and the other is black and white film. The very first shot in Heather's apartment is out of focus and shaky, establishing that the film is a particularly amateurish production, even by found footage standards. This flick legendarily made a lot of people sick watching it in theaters thanks to the shakiness. It's like Michael J. Fox shot this film. Many of the night scenes are totally incomprehensible because there's absolutely no lighting.
Jesus Christ, what the fuck is that?
Here's the thing, though. I like the rough look of the movie. It has a gritty feel that's authentic and it makes sense. These are amateur filmmakers using whatever equipment they have. It's something that I feel most found footage films lack. The homemade look. Blair Witch Project looks like old home movies. It doesn't look like anything that was shot was prepared ahead of time. It's an organic approach that sells this movie as an actual documentary where things just suddenly happen and the characters shoot whatever they can on impulse, like real filmmakers, instead of having contrived shots.
I don't fucking think it's deer, though, man. It sounds exactly like the shit last night. It's on all sides of us.
I also really love the contrast of color and black and white film. It's an uncomfortable back and forth. The black and white footage has an eerie, otherworldly quality to it, and the drabness of the color footage makes the woods look like a wasteland. It looks like fucking Chernobyl. The first 15 minutes of Blair Witch Project mostly concerns itself with setting up the backstory of the Blair Witch, but the movie kind of neglects actually telling the backstory of the Blair Witch herself.
I want to present this in as straightforward a way as possible, and I think the legend is unsettling enough.
The only interviewee that really discusses the witch directly is Molly Brown, a creepy-looking spinster who supposedly saw the Blair Witch and is really fixated on her being hairy.
On her arm, on her hands and everything, it was like hair, like a
real dark, almost black hair. Like a horse.
Like fur?
Yeah, like a fur, like horse fur. Under it, there was hair on her body, like a horse.
So she was hairy from head to toe.
I think this bitch just saw somebody headed to a furry convention. Most of the interviews with locals and visits to points of interest, like the cemetery and Coffin Rock, instead focus on illustrating the spooky impact that the Blair Witch supposedly had on the community of Burkittsville over the years, completely skimming over who the Blair Witch was and why there even is a curse.
Yeah, it's a story my grandmother used to tell us all. Make us go to bed early.
Really?
If you want to know that pretty vital info, you gotta go to the old website or watch the Curse of the Blair Witch mockumentary. But if you don't want to bother with all that, I'll just tell you all an abridged version of the backstory. First though, let's check up on Goulash. Hey Goulash, how's the expedition been?
Sir, I've been lost in these woods for 3 days. Where have you been?
Oh, I've still been, recording this review.
For 3 days?
I like to take breaks in the middle every now and then. So, have you caught a glimpse of the Blair Witch yet?
I don't know. I've been hearing some weird shit at night. I've just been walking south for 2 days straight. At least I think it's south. The compass you gave me is just a brick with a drawing of a compass taped to it.
Only the best gear for my #1 guy.
I'm really scared right now.
I'm sure you'll find your way out of the woods. Try walking north this time.
No, don't go.
Oh, that Goulash. He's such a goofball. Alrighty, let's talk about the Blair Witch mythos, shall we? It all starts with a little town in the 18th century called Blair. Now, after the American Revolution, fear of witches had mostly been dismissed as, well, you know, retarded. But in the smaller backwater settlements, the superstition was still very much alive. A resident of Blair named Ellie Kedward was accused of drawing blood from some local kids. Yeah, the Red Cross wasn't as appreciated back then. So Ellie, or the Blair Witch, was exiled during a harsh winter and supposedly succumbed to the elements. A year later, though, all of the Blair Witch's accusers and half the town's children disappeared like a Thanos snap. Afraid of a curse, the town of Blair was packed up, and then, like 40 years later, Burkittsville was built in the old town's place. Really saved some money. Of course, a year later, a little girl got pulled down into a shallow river by a, ghost hand, and her body was never found. A little bit of buyer's remorse there. The basic conceit is that every few decades, some bad shit happens in Burkittsville that's blamed on the Blair Witch. Skip ahead another 40 years, and another girl went missing and a search party was sent out. This time around, though, the little girl returned, telling a story of an old woman leading her out into the woods. Weird, but a happy ending, I guess. Except, the search party looking for the girl went missing themselves. Sweet irony! A week later, at the whimsically named Coffin Rock, the search party was found tied up to each other, which sounds kinky, but they were also disemboweled. I'm sure somebody's into that, but personally, that tests my limits. Of course, the real notable aspect of the Blair Witch mythos, and the thing that the interviews really fixate on, happened in the 40s.
I remember Mr. Parr was an old hermit.
Right.
And he lived up on a mountain. He had a place up there, been there for a long, long time.
8 kids were abducted from Burkittsville. The abductee was Rustin Parr, a hermit in the nearby Black Woods, who killed 7 of the kids, sparing 1, who had to stand in a corner while the murders happened.
Said in court that he couldn't take the eyes on him. He could feel the eyes watching him. That's why he made him face into the corner.
Rustin did this because he heard a voice in his head, i.e. the Blair Witch, and in order to make it stop, he had to kill the kids. I probably would have just moved, but whatever. Rustin confessed to the crimes and was hung. And now you know the rest of the backstory. Good day? Oh, but if you're wondering how the footage of this film was found, well, some anthropology students discovered it in a duffel bag beneath the foundation of a 100-year-old house in the woods. The weird thing is that, there's no way that it could have been there without disrupting the foundation, like the footage was magically teleported. I wonder if we'll find Jimmy Hoffa like that. Honestly, I feel like the backstory conceived for this flick might be one of the best legends made up for a horror movie. I think the mythos is an underrated aspect of Blair Witch Project and is a genuinely creepy but believable urban legend. People fucking bought this shit. It's not too over the top. Even when people knew the movie was fake, there were still folks that believed the legend of Burkittsville was real. I'd recommend checking out the supplemental materials for more info. It's pretty much essential to this movie, fortunately and unfortunately. Getting back to the actual story of the movie, well, there isn't much of one once Heather, Mike, and Josh go into the Black Hills forest to check out Coffin Rock.
They went into the woods prepared to find death. What they found was a desecration of humanity at the site which trappers have often referred to as Coffin Rock.
The trio lose track of Josh's car and get lost for several days.
All I'm saying is that you got us lost, man.
For a very brief amount of time.
And remain lost for the remaining hour of the film. Like, most of the action in the film is just watching people walk through woods, which, you know, is the plot of all 3 Lord of the Rings films, but still, the story of Blair Witch Project is minimal, and there's not exactly a lot of conventional scares along the way. The pattern the film follows can be summed up as characters wander around, find some weird shit like piles of rocks or stick figures, and at night they might hear some creepy noises or the tent shakes. I'm gonna let you know right away that this flick doesn't get much more intense than bundles of sticks, but who knows? Maybe that's enough to make you shit your pants. The Blair Witch, though? Well, she's never actually seen in this movie at any point, which pisses off a lot of people.
Is that the Blair Witch? No. I think it's Heather taking a piss.
Now, when the characters get chased by something at night, the Blair Witch was supposed to be recorded on video briefly.
Oh my god, what the fuck is that? Dude, what the fuck is that?
Heather clearly sees it, and in reality it was a guy in white long johns, but the shot wasn't captured clearly. This is one of the most controversial aspects of the film, the fact that the movie withholds anything that could maybe be cool or freaky. Like, most horror flicks conceal the scary shit, but you still see the shark, the killer, the poltergeists, eventually. To me, though, not showing shit really works for Blair Witch Project for multiple reasons, of which I'm about to break down. Firstly, it's more believable as found footage if it's not definitive proof of ghost witches existing. Secondly, the movie is totally ambiguous, which is the real magic of this film. The fact that there might not be anything supernatural going on. The only overtly supernatural thing in this flick is the fact that the characters will walk for days and still end up at the same log, like they're stuck in a time loop.
Oh, that's the tree we crossed. That tree is down. That's the same one.
This could be explained, though, as a deception by one or all of the characters. That's the thing I love about this film. There are no answers. It's a movie that's meant to be discussed in depth, and you just have to come to your own conclusions. A witch never being seen makes it scarier to me because you don't know the nature of the thing. The unknown just scares the shit out of me, okay? The sinister things that might be happening all around you that you don't know. And I'm not talking about conspiracy shit, just the ghost witches that are hovering all around us.
2 nights in a row, we've lit a fire. We didn't light one the first night.
And nothing happened.
We light fires, they know. I haven't heard anything follow us. We should even turn that light off, too.
Because the ghost witch shit isn't seen, though, something else could be happening. There could just be people out in the woods with the characters who are never seen, and that's still fucking creepy. Mike and Josh could have just been out to get Heather the whole time, or maybe it was just a hoax, like in reality, and the characters simply faked their deaths to profit off of their footage years later. Which, yeah, is pretty much what happened. To me, not seeing the Blair Witch just makes this movie fun to think about and talk about later. You can also frame this movie in any way that personally makes it scariest for you. It's totally open-ended because of the lack of the Blair Witch, and I wish more found footage films had this discipline. But let's see if Goulash has had any luck seeing the Blair Witch himself, shall we?
It's day 12, sir. I'm so fucking hopelessly lost.
But have you seen the Blair Witch, Goulash?
No, but I found this clearing with a bunch of stick figures in it.
Oh, nifty. You should, take one of them with you.
What? Why would I want to do that?
Oh, you know, a little souvenir.
Sir, if I didn't know any better, I'd assume that you were deliberately trying to get my ass kicked by a ghost witch.
Oh, that's ridiculous, Goulash. I'll tell you what, if you see the Blair Witch, I'll take you to IHOP. Don't you want to go to IHOP, huh?
I guess.
Fantastic. Now, since there's not really much in the way of, tangible, scary shit, Blair Witch Project instead relies on the performances to sell this movie as a horror flick.
Fuck you!
This is so long.
The direction of Blair Witch Project was pretty radical in that there is very little direction at all. Hell, the movie has no written dialogue whatsoever. The film's 35-page script was just a basic outline of what would happen in the movie.
Well, I find it very cool that I get laughed at because my shoes are wet for the rest of the day. I find that fucking hilarious.
Essentially, the film was shot over the course of several days by the actors who recorded as much of the experience as possible. The actors shot 20 hours of footage in total, which had to have been a bitch to edit.
No, you
want to stay here, you want to film rocks, you want to look around, you want to fucking like...
Let's go.
Get this, you want to get that. Which way are we walking?
That way.
Dude, we're in the middle of the fucking woods.
It says something about the filmmakers, though. They put their faith in the actors to basically make up an entire movie. The actors essentially play themselves through a lens of pretending to make a documentary about a witch.
Because we're making a documentary.
Not about us getting lost. We're making a documentary about a witch.
All the dialogue is improvised, and when the characters are just hanging out or walking, you can guarantee that it's genuinely real banter, either goofing around or theorizing about what's going on.
I am seriously fucking positive these were not here. How would we have, like, just made a campsite in between 3 piles of rocks just by coincidence?
I honestly appreciate this hands-off approach, and you don't really see it much with found footage. You know, most found footage movies still have scripted dialogue and a planned-out structure for scenes. Blair Witch Project, though, is kind of like a reality show where the contestants have to pretend they're actually in danger. The actors had a predetermined path set for them by the crew that they had to follow, with certain planned set pieces along the way that they had to react to and try to figure out the meaning of on their own.
Oh, Jesus Christ, I didn't even fucking see these, man.
The actors were blindly strung along by the actual filmmakers, who also gradually gave the cast less food along the way, so the performances would ring true as tired and desperate. Which, you know, is kind of a shitty thing to do, but this is a movie that really needs as much reality as possible to work. Still, if you're an indie filmmaker, feed your actors. The real horror of Blair Witch, though, to me, is watching people unravel during a truly hopeless situation, and I feel like the performances really sell that.
Just relax, Mike.
Don't fucking tell me to relax!
The characters start off as easygoing smartasses like typical college students with some funny moments together, but, of course, when things start to get shitty, even just a little shitty, the attitudes take a sharp turn to the negative.
Did you agree to do this project?
I did. I agreed to a scouted-out project.
The characters argue throughout the film, but in a way that makes them feel kind of like a family. The characters get angry with each other, but it doesn't feel like they really hate each other. There's a surprising nuance to the character dynamics where, even through their differences, they're all still in this shit together and rely upon each other. The performances are pretty fucking great. It just feels like real people trapped in unending woods. There are some really upsetting character moments, and it's thanks in no small part to the fact that the actors oftentimes didn't know certain things would happen ahead of time. When the map was lost, only Mike the actor knew that he threw that map in the fucking creek because it was useless anyway.
I kicked that fucking map into the creek yesterday. It was useless. I kicked that fucker into the creek.
So when he dropped that bombshell, the other actors' responses were genuine surprise that they had to play out his anger.
I really fucking hope he's kidding.
Kidding?
I really fucking hope he's kidding.
Are you fucking kidding?
You've got to be kidding me. You have got to fucking be kidding me.
Fucking get the fuck off me, man.
What the fuck are you out of your fucking mind?
Heather is the standout in the movie, and she does on the surface come off as a total bitch, but really, she's just trying to desperately maintain her leader image against a really uneven power dynamic with 2 dudes in the woods.
Just please stop yelling at me, please.
Heather plays herself up as a powerful, authoritative figure that has everything planned out, which is what a lot of amateur directors do, but when shit goes off course, the facade falls apart swiftly, and Josh and Mike basically mutiny against their captain.
At the twilight's last.
Josh and Mike work as great male counterparts to Heather. Josh comes off as this chill, underachiever dude, but with limits to his patience.
I'm not playing head games, man. If anyone's playing head games, you're playing head games, but I'm not playing head games.
And Mike is a goof who's quick to anger, but is ultimately a spineless follower.
I ain't going down there.
Why not?
Because I'm not. I don't hear shit.
Because you're fucking scared.
Because I don't hear anything
Because
anymore.
you're fucking scared. You could not deny hearing it.
Again, the performances are great, especially since it's all improv, and despite missing some of the narrative tissues of more conventional films, how the characters behave and develop mostly makes sense. The movie even explains why the characters are constantly filming, even while horrible shit happens. If you're looking through a camera, it feels less real and can remove you from a scary situation.
No, but it's totally like a filtered reality, man. It's like you can pretend everything's not quite the way it is.
It's something I never really thought about with found footage. The unwritten rule of found footage is to just record everything and not bother with explanations, but Blair Witch Project just sort of tosses out a totally plausible explanation for the practice. One thing that's not totally clear, though, is why the characters don't do much of anything in their situation beyond walking. Like, the trio never tries to do anything like climb a tree to find out where they are, or even just set some shit on fire. Of course, they couldn't fucking set a forest on fire for this movie, but still, the final stretches of the film really lose steam, and things get dull in the build-up to the finale, which I guess illustrates the hopelessness of the characters in their final moments, but, you know, they could have come up with some more weird shit to happen towards the end. Speaking of end, okay, I'm gonna be spoiling the rest of Blair Witch Project. Yeah, this movie came out 20 years ago, and this film has one of the most widely known endings ever, but I haven't done these spoiler warnings in a bit, so skip to the time code to avoid spoilers or whatever. Let's catch up with Goulash first. Hey Goulash, any progress?
There's like a house, but I'm getting kind of a something in there is going to hurt me energy from it.
Well, if you don't go in that damn house, I'm gonna hurt ya. So weigh your fucking options, mister.
Okay, I'll check it out, I guess.
You fucking better.
Fuck.
Back to the review. At a certain point, Josh suddenly disappears, and it's just Mike and Heather.
Josh!
The only hint that this would happen is slime that Josh found on his shit.
It is slime. What the fuck is that?
What? Did the witch come all over Josh's backpack? In the end, Mike and Heather, who were strangers before the project began, finally get along once all hope is lost, and hope is definitely lost when Heather finds a little gift from the witch, a bundle of sticks and Josh's shirt wrapped around teeth, hair, and, some bloody shit. This is the only gore or hint of violence in the movie, but it shows that the characters are in danger, and hey, those teeth were actually real. Gross. This leads to the penultimate scene and one of the film's most iconic, Heather's confession. Heather basically fesses up and admits defeat, taking responsibility for her and especially her friends' eventual deaths after basically egging on the witch's appearance by kicking the rocks and taking one of the stick figures.
She left little trinkets. You fucking took one of them.
Heather just didn't pass the rock and stick tests. The confession is a very raw scene that gets across the genuine terror of the situation, but it's also kind of fucking gross with all the snot and tears.
I'm scared to close my eyes. I'm scared to open them.
I gotta hand it to Heather Donahue. She really pushed herself in this fucking scene. After this, Mike and Heather are drawn to an old house in the night that Josh's pained voice is coming from. Sounds like fun.
Come on, in the house.
Yeah, definitely blindly go into the dilapidated house in the middle of the night where your friend is being tortured. Real solid plan. Inside, the two, of course, split up in search for clues. The house, which may or may not have belonged to Rustin Parr, was a real abandoned house in the woods that's since been destroyed, and with the kid handprints on the walls, it's very fucking creepy, I gotta say. Especially with its barren appearance and apparent emptiness. Of course, it all leads up to the iconic final shot. After Mike is seemingly attacked, Heather descends into the basement and finds Mike just standing in the corner. This is a definite callback to Rustin Parr, who put a kid in a corner during his murders, and Heather is seemingly killed herself. The ending is a bit of an anticlimax. The movie just fucking ends, but the ending always gives me a cold, empty feeling that sticks with me. I really do think it's one of the best horror film endings of all time. Blair Witch Project was a phenomenon, but once the dust settled, it became much maligned, especially once most people realized that it wasn't real at all. For many people, it just didn't live up to the insane amount of hype. There's this impression that the movie really was just people pretending to be scared while camping. Myself, I'm a fan of this film, and I didn't see it when it first came out. I saw it years after. The flick was one of the most highly parodied, and I have to say, I watched the Scooby-Doo Project and Blair Thumb before the actual Blair Witch Project, but the movie still worked for me. The restraint of the film, the realism, and the lore all just fascinated me. It was a very different kind of horror flick that engaged me on many levels. Blair Witch Project is no masterpiece, it's got a lot of problems, and the hype it got didn't help help its case one bit. As a franchise, Blair Witch was pretty much killed off immediately a year later by the non-found footage sequel, which may have been a major miscalculation, but is still a guilty pleasure of mine.
I thought the movie was cool.
The last nail in the coffin was the 2016 reboot, which was found footage but too little too late, and a rehash that kind of missed the point of the original's appeal. I feel like what made Blair Witch Project a success can never be replicated with a sequel. Blair Witch Project may have faded away from the spotlight, but it shouldn't be discounted. This was a very important film. It demonstrated the powerful influence of the internet through marketing trickery. It inspired indie filmmakers by showing that a movie could be made with literally whatever's available and still manage to be a success. People who hate this flick don't consider its budget, experimental nature, and the fact that it was the first movie made by these filmmakers. Again, Blair Witch Project isn't a masterpiece, but you can learn a lot from what made this movie a success if you're an aspiring filmmaker. Just when you make a movie, try to make sure it's still liked years later. I give the Blair Witch Project sticks out of stones. Now, before I go, let's see what old Goulash is up to one last time. Hey Goulash, how's it going? Oh shit! No! Goulash! Goulash! No!
What are you yelling about?
Goulash, you're okay? Where did you get those pancakes?
Oh, well, it turns out this house in the woods was actually an IHOP, and I decided to get a plate of hotcakes while I was here.
So, there's no Blair Witch?
It was just a movie, sir.
But what about the stick figures and the noises you heard?
It turns out that the stick figures were being used to build this IHOP, and the noises were just the construction.
Oh, well, I guess that makes sense.
Makes perfect sense. Man, these pancakes are so good.
Can I have some?
No, get your own.
Oh, come on!
This video is brought to you by IHOP. Use promo code Wolfula fucking rocks to get your next IHOP meal free. Just shout the promo code to your server and leave the restaurant in a hurry.
If you like this video, like it. But if you loved it, subscribe for more and click that motherfucking bell to keep track of future uploads and streams. Also, follow me on social media at Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Dr. Wolfula. Finally, if you can, support the channel by pledging to my Patreon. You'll help the channel grow and get some bonus goodies in return, like exclusive streams, previews, videos, and shoutouts. Speaking of which, I'd like to give thanks to the Platinum supporters that helped make this video possible. Thank you to Sean O'Brien, Tom Wade, Reckless, Willie Grills, Eddie De La Cruz Huerta, Tyler Booth, Simon Ausmus, Crossroad King, Gary Miller, Lou Mail, Taylor Powell, Mr. Maskey, Zachary Nash, and the Evil Gimp. Here's a full list of all my Platinum supporters. The channel would be nothing without viewers like them, and their support is greatly appreciated by me. Thanks again to all of you from your old pal, Dr. Wolfula. See you all next time, folks. Thanks for watching.
Personally,
Yeah.
I think it was someone fucking with your head.
So nobody knows we're out here.
Yeah, but you ever see Deliverance?